Welcome to Radio Reverrb with CEO and host Susan Brender. Podcasting is a vital way to be a voice in your community and be empowered in your work or cause. Join Susan Brender as she teaches the art of podcasting to adults and youth from all walks of life all across the globe. Here's your host, Susan Brender.
I'm Susan Brender, and this is Radio Reverrb. Today I have two people on my show. One is going to be my co-host, and the other one is our wonderful and amazing guy who happens to be a 95-year-old Tuskegee Airman. Now, for those of you who don't know what Tuskegee Airmen, we're going to have Lieutenant Colonel Jefferson tell you a little bit about it. Now, Lieutenant Colonel Jefferson, his name is Alexander Jefferson, was born in 1921 in Detroit, Michigan. He's a retired U.S. Air Force officer, famous as one of the most interesting Tuskegee Airmen in the 32nd Fighter Group, 32nd Fighter Group. He served in the Army, the U.S. Army Corps, during World War II, and he wrote a book, and his book is called Red Tail Captured, Red Tail Free, Memoirs of a Tuskegee Airman and POW. Now, this is his personal memoir of those who served served America in World War II and after. So I want to welcome to my show Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Jefferson and my co-host Ramzy Sweis. So, welcome to the show, Lieutenant Colonel.
Thank you.
Now, Ramzy, when you heard that you had an opportunity to be my co-host to interview Colonel Alexander, what were your thoughts? What were you feeling?
What can I say? How can I get it across to young people the importance that literally we helped to defeat the most evil society the world has ever known, Germany.
That's right. Yeah. And Ramzy, you must have a question for Lieutenant Colonel Alexander right now, too.
Well, yeah, when I first heard of this opportunity, I went and I read all about you. I read your book. I watched your movies on the History Channel, National Geographic. I watched Red Tails, and how true to life is when you watch Red Tails, the movie starring Cuba Gooding Jr. and Terrence Howard. How true to life was that?
Red Tails, strictly Hollywood. It's false. Give you the wrong idea.
What makes it false, Lieutenant Colonel?
Well, to tell you the truth, I liked it because it brought the plight of black men flying in World War II to the front, made it aware. But some of the incidents on Red Tails was false. He flies around and sees a pretty woman and flies down and blows her a kiss, and she waves to him. Come on now, that's Hollywood. Things like that never happen.
So the character Lightning was based on you. That was the guy who falls in love. That's your character.
Well, what can I say? It's a false presentation. It gives the kids a false presentation.
Because the cadet that was captured, the cadet that was captured, Little, I figured that was you. The one that was captured in Berlin, I thought that was based on you.
But how in the hell is he going to ever get out? Going out through a tunnel with his dark skin, he's supposed to go to a small train station, buy a ticket, and get back to American forces. That's false.
But the main idea was that the fact that they protected every single U.S. bomber. That was actually fact.
Actually fact.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, there was a contemptible resistance for African-American aviation. There's no confidence in your success. How disheartening was that?
That was very, very true. The whole idea of blacks flying in World War II was phenomenal.
Yeah.
But I hated Red Tails because the main character, the hero, was drunk.
Yeah, but I really fell in love with the movie. I know it was so Hollywood. But it was a 2-hour movie, $150 million. It has 6 stars rating. I gave it a 10-star rating. And I know there was only 13 Red Tails, and in the movie there was 86. But it was better than Top Gun. It was the best movie I've seen about aviation I've ever seen, and I've seen all of them.
All right.
Now, Colonel Jefferson, why don't you set the stage for both Ramzy and I? Give us an idea and give my audience an idea of what the situation really was. I'd like them to understand what you were thinking, what really happened. Really just set the stage.
Well, set the stage. We were a separate. We went over as a separate squadron. To tell you the truth, a squadron is 16 airplanes. 16 airplanes, 4 flights of 4, 4 flights of 4, which means 16 planes with all the complement, the mechanics, the radio men, the whole survival. This was phenomenal.
Yeah, it must have been phenomenal. You know, you're giving us your ideas and your opinion about things. What about the other Tuskegee Airmen? What was the relationship that you all had, and how were you treated?
We were all treated. We're all together. Remember now, we also had a B-25 outfit, men who learned how to fly at Tuskegee and Army Airfield, and it went into a B-25 outfit that a group. Bomber group that never got overseas. They went from base to base and were supposed to go to Japan, but they dropped the atomic bomb. And we all understand together. We were all part of the team together.
Interesting. Now, Ramzy, have you a question for Lieutenant Colonel?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, it's such an honor to, as a 95-year-old man, to dispel your expertise and thank you for your service. And I do have a question. So when they called it the experiment, how did you not take that personally? Because it seemed as if
about it. We thought it was an opportunity.
Oh, I see.
It was an opportunity to fight the system.
See, that's why I'm so inspired by you.
You understand? Segregation was segregation, and you couldn't fight it. The only way to fight it is to join it. There's an old saying: to change things, you have to join it. You have to become part of it. Jackie Robinson was not the best black baseball player, but he was able to get into the system and to cope with the nasty words and turn his back. And once he got in the system, he changed it.
Yeah,
That's the same way we acted getting into the Army Air Corps. It was an experiment. The whites were experimenting to see if blacks could join the Air Force, Army Air Corps, and become pilot and become effective.
Become a trailblazer, a groundbreaker, a pioneer.
Somebody had to do it.
Yeah, you pass a real message on to the youth. So thank you.
Then what happened in 1948? President Truman, on the basis of Tuskegee Airmen, and by the way, blacks in the Army, blacks in the military, in the Marines, in the Army, blacks in the Navy, blacks in the Air Force. On the basis of that, President Truman, in 1948, integrated the military.
Now, there was a rumor that President Truman was actually very biased and not particularly in favor of blacks in general. Mm-hmm. And his wife, supposedly, who wrote a lot of books, she was the culprit too.
Well, maybe so. But under the circumstances, they found the Army Air Corps found out it was impractical to have a separate black Air Force and a white Air Force. It was impractical financially.
Now, can you describe to our audience what it was like to be up in the air, to be working as a pilot?
It was to fly the exhilaration of flight. It was fantastic. All I can do is say one word. It was fantastic.
Wow.
There's no way there's no way other than to say it was exhilarating, fantastic, and even today, if you go flying today, same thing happens.
Yeah. Speaking of today, what do you think is the real difference between the way things were then as opposed to the way things are now? We have so many sophisticated and fabulous kinds of equipment and technology and various kinds of things that really are almost scary because, I mean, the way it seems to me is that it can be just devastating.
No. The old-fashioned automobile had a clutch and a stick in the middle with a gear shift. You learned how to drive. Today, by the way, you took driver lessons. Now today, same thing. You go to school, you go to a class with all the dials. Now today, the planes are sophisticated, but if you go to class and you learn how to fly, you've got an altimeter, you've got a radar, you've got all these different things. You learn how to push the buttons.
But the duration is a lot different. When you practice to be in the Air Force, you did it, it was a lot more dangerous, a lot more risk, and the duration was a lot longer. Now that people just go into like an arcade system and they learn, and if they pass, then they get to fly in a real plane.
Yes, indeed. You learn things. There's the old saying, you go to a class and you learn how to fly. You learn how to use a system. Today, you've got a smartphone. You can hand a smartphone, but if you don't go to class and learn how to click left, right, you can't use it. Same thing with the modern planes today. You learn how to deal with the system, with the new automation of planes.
That's right. Lieutenant, when you have an opportunity, and you did for a long time, to teach kids to go in front of a classroom or in a place where young people gather, give us an idea of what you talk to them about. Tell our audience really what you think is the most important thing that they need to know. I mean, because somebody like you, who's up in age, and we hope that you live to 150 if you have your chance. But what do you think is important that you leave kids with today? What kind of information?
Understanding the world, understanding nature, understanding the atmosphere, this world we live in, dealing with, as we commonly say, Mama Nature.
Right.
Elementary science. Teaching these young people how to meet the world as it is. Meet rain. Why does it rain? Right. This is the question. Yeah. Simple. Why does it rain? How does it rain? Where does it come from? How does it happen? Everybody says, it just rains. No. Water has to evaporate. As it rises, it goes up a certain distance, and the temperature changes, cooler temperature, and it condenses into a cloud. A cloud, yes, water condenses, changing temperature. And what's the difference of what's a hurricane? Where does it come from? Why? How does it happen? These are the things to open these young minds to meet and understand things that happen today. And it goes into radar. What's radar? How does it happen? What's the consequence of it? In other words, how does airplanes fly? What produces the lift on an airplane? A 747 weighs how many tons? Something like 80 or 90, I can't remember now, tons.
Right.
How is the lift produced to get that airplane in the air? Simply. This is on a third grade level. I can understand. I can teach the young people why a 747 stays up in the air. And just understanding life, things around you, things that happen. In other words, things just don't happen unknowingly. There are causes, cause and effect.
Exactly.
And I enjoyed...
Go ahead, Ramzy.
No, I was going to say that this is very wise. It's very sage wisdom. It's very important to understand the practicalities of life and not get down. Once you understand there's a cause and effect, then you won't take things personally. You won't get depressed. You won't. The world won't revolve around you.
Yes.
What?
Now, Colonel Jefferson, most people don't know that you were a principal in schools.
Well, I hated that.
Oh, interesting. Why?
Too darn much paperwork.
Now, do you feel very optimistic about our society today? Do you feel that kids are getting what they need in schools? Just as you explained a moment ago, you said that it's very important to be curious. It's very important to learn the basics.
That's right. Only in certain schools are these basics, principles being taught to children. Some of the schools are losing out because the adults do not understand the importance of children understanding the laws around them.
Exactly.
If you had a chance again to go back in time, what would you say to parents? How would you deal with the fact that kids now, everything is technology. So all they do is they message people and they call. Well, they don't even speak face to face anymore. They're just always involved in technology. Do you think that technology is doing good for our generation?
Of course. Absolutely. There's an old saying. Let's take for instance, in 1940, what's the difference between 1940 and 1840?
What?
Tell us.
You realize that since 1900, in 100 years, we have gone from no automobiles to millions of automobiles in 100 years. 100 years ago, we had no airplanes. Now we have jets across. 100 years ago, we had no shots for all different kinds of vaccinations.
Right. It's true.
See, these are things that can be explained and be talked about and explained to children and to adults.
Now, how many Tuskegee Airmen are still around? Do you know?
We're talking about people, the pilots. We're talking about mechanics. We're talking about doctors, butchers, the whole shebang. There are 25,000 people who were Tuskegee Airmen.
Oh.
25,000.
So do you keep in touch with them, and are they still around?
Oh, today, we doubt it. We're all 90, 95, 90. Out of the 900, there were 900 pilots trained during World War II. 900. Today, we suspect there may be 10 to 15 still living.
Right.
900.
That's amazing. And so people of your nature and people who know so much about the Air Force and flying, and there's only 9 left. I am very interested in knowing, what do you want to tell people now that they don't know? I mean, what about the Tuskegee Airmen that is very special and worth knowing?
A group of men and women, well, the women too, they're nurses, the black nurses who were segregated, people making progress. There were 25 to 30,000 people who were part of the system of this country who literally joined the system and helped to change the system and helped to improve it. I think we did a marvelous job.
Yes, you
in
did.
Changing the system.
Yes,
it was
you did.
segregated before, and we positively gave quite a bit.
Even to this day, you've had a lasting impact. You've changed the course of the world forever.
We've changed in terms, think of it, in terms of food. We've changed the food, fashions. We've changed music. The world has changed because of our endeavor. Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, Ramzy, you have another question for Lieutenant Jefferson?
Yeah, I just have one last question, Colonel Jefferson. When the decision was made to, in the movie Red Tails, when you were flying, when you flew to Berlin, you were told that you did not have to do it. So what went through your mind? Because you ended up getting captured in Berlin. So when you were told that it was not an order, you did not have to go to Berlin, what made all of the cadets power through to take it on themselves and to take that flight?
So, by the way, our commanding officer, Colonel Davis, knew that we had fuel to escort the B-17s and B-24s. Now remember, every bomber had 10 men, and our job was to protect those men on the way to the target and coming back. If we had turned around and left those men, they would be subjected to German fighters coming in and shooting them down. So we stayed with the bombers until they went to the target and came back to be relieved by another group that took off, another group of P-51s who took off about 4 or 5 or 6 hours later and met these bombers as they came back off the target. We had a job to do, and the thing was to protect those men in the bombers and gave them protection from that point to the target and back. We had a job to do. We could not desert those men because there were 10, 12, 15, 18. There were 32 bombers.
And how long was the flight?
With 10 men on each bomber. Hell, that's 300 men to leave them to German fighters. So we had to escort to protect them.
And when you say you had enough fuel, how many hours were you up in the air? 13?
No, 6 to 8.
My goodness, I can't believe that. 8 hours straight.
Yeah, you remember now. A P-51 Merlin engine burned a gallon a minute.
Right. So when you were shot down and you went to a concentration camp, how were
No, I did not go to a concentration.
Oh, you didn't? Okay.
No. I did not go to Dachau or Buchenwald or Auschwitz. I was in a POW camp. We were POWs.
Ah. So how were you treated there?
I was treated by the Germans as an officer and a gentleman.
Really?
Yes. No beatings, no torture, no aggravation. Simply put, you read about POWs. We were put in we were captured, and we were treated as officers and gentlemen.
It's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've seen plenty of movies and I've read a lot of books, and yes, POWs in certain circumstances were treated okay, but in other circumstances, in Japan,
that's right, it was, because the Germany, United States, England, France sat down in 1939 and signed the Geneva Convention, which denoted the conditions on how you treat POWs. You put the officers in a camp. Do not make them work. Give them all the amenities of Red Cross food parcels. Treat them humanely. Put the enlisted men in a separate camp. Treat them humanely. You can make them work under certain circumstances. Now, Japan did not. Far Eastern countries did not sign the Geneva Convention.
See, this is something very interesting that I wasn't aware of, and I'm sure a lot of other people weren't aware, because we've seen plenty of movies out there about the way that POWs were treated in Japan and in the Philippines, horribly. So it's encouraging, and it's a good fact to learn about this. I find it very interesting. Now, I want to ask you, and this is the last word, if you had a chance, Lieutenant Colonel Jefferson, to say something to our young people and to just our audience in general, what would you want to tell them?
Be a nerd.
That's really good advice.
Be a nerd. Sit on the front seat of class.
So Colonel Jefferson,
exactly everything the teacher has to offer.
I agree. I'd be a teacher's pet. There's no shame in that. There's no shame in being a nerd, and I couldn't thank you enough for that advice, and I'll continue to pass that on to my generation. But if you, I have to ask you, and it might not be it's a little bit of a personal question, but do you ever have post-traumatic stress disorder?
Hell no. I've been talking about this thing all my life, and no post stress for me. I simply tell it like it is.
What do you attribute that to, Colonel Jefferson? Because so many people now, our young men, are coming back with PTSD. They're coming back from the Middle East, and all the circumstances they have to deal with are causing just huge numbers of young people who have to go on disability because of PTSD.
I have no idea why. My attitude simply had segregation before the war, segregation during the war, segregation after the war, because things are still going on. And my attitude, everybody in the world is crazy except you and me.
That's a good attitude.
Certain times, I'm not so sure about you.
That's really interesting. Ramzy, let me leave the last question for you. Is there any particular thing that you think we've missed asking Colonel Jefferson?
It's been possible. We've covered quite a bit. Thank you for the opportunity.
Well, it's our pleasure, and I want to just tell our audience that today we've been talking to Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Jefferson, who is from the Tuskegee Airmen, and I hope that you live till, I want to say 150 years old, because you have a lot to offer, Colonel Jefferson.
Yeah, I think 200 years old, or 250.
There you go. And so thank you to my co-host, Ramzy Sweis, for joining me in interviewing Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Jefferson. Thank you very much for being on our show.
Thank you, Colonel. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Radio Reverb with host Susan Brender. Interested in being a guest? Contact sebrender@yahoo.com.